The sun hammered the cracked earth, leaching moisture from bone and rock alike. Maylin tasted dust and desperation. Behind her, the empty, endless stretch of land offered no promise of safety, only the threat of what might follow. Beside her, Bao, her son, shifted his weight, his small face pale with exhaustion and pain. His left leg, twisted since birth, dragged like a dead weight, a constant impediment to their desperate flight. She held his hand, pulling him forward, each step a monumental effort against the wind that whipped at her clothes and the sun that bleached the sky white. They had been running for days, maybe weeks, the memory of what they fled blurring into a persistent, shapeless terror. Food was long gone, water a memory. The landscape offered only thorns and indifferent stone. She stumbled, catching herself, her knees protesting. Bao whimpered, leaning against her side. How much farther? The question was a silent scream in her mind, unanswered by the vast, unyielding horizon. They were moving through a deceptively flat basin, the ground looking solid under the shimmering heat haze. But the earth here was treacherous. The air grew thick, the flies buzzed in a low, irritating hum. Maylin felt a sudden chill despite the heat, a primal warning she couldn't articulate. Her foot sank deeper than it should have. Then the other, cold, viscous earth gripped her ankles, pulling her down with insidious speed. Quicksand. Her breath caught in her throat. She yanked her feet, a futile, frantic motion that only deepened her entrapment. Bao cried out, terrified, as the earth sucked them both in. Mama! His voice was thin, panicked. She tried to pull him up, but the earth held her fast, dragging her lower. The sand rose around her calves, then her knees. Fear, sharp and absolute, seized her. They would die here, swallowed by the silent, hungry land, erased without a trace. She scrabbled at the edges, but there was nothing firm to hold on to. The sand crept up her thighs, cold and heavy. Bao, lighter, was sinking slower, but he was still connected to her, still being pulled down. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the dust and sweat. She held Bao tighter, bracing for the end, a silent apology forming on her lips for bringing him to this godforsaken place, for failing to protect him. The horizon shimmered, mocking their plight. A figure appeared on the distant ridge, silhouetted against the blinding sky. A man on horseback. He paused, watching. Maylin felt a fresh wave of despair. Another soul to witness their end, or perhaps something worse. She made no sound, no plea. Her throat was choked with sand and terror. She simply stared, trapped, waiting for the inevitable embrace of the earth. The man didn't move for a long moment, just a dark shape observing their slow, silent drowning. Then, deliberately, he urged his horse down the slope. He approached slowly, cautiously, dismounting a safe distance away. He was tall, lean, weathered, dressed in worn leather and denim. A cowboy. His face was shadowed by his hat, but his gaze, when it met hers, was steady, unreadable. He saw their predicament, the quicksand already past her waist. He saw the crippled boy clinging to his mother, eyes wide with fear. He didn't shout, didn't rush. He moved with a quiet competence that was both alien and suddenly, impossibly hopeful. He uncoiled a length of rope from his saddle. He cast the rope, a loop landing awkwardly near them. Grab hold. His voice was low, gravelly, cutting through the drone of the flies. It was the first human voice Maylin had heard in days that wasn't her own or Bao's terrified whispers. She hesitated, suspicion warring with desperate hope. He was a stranger, a white man, in a world that had shown her only cruelty. But the cold earth was rising to her chest. Grab it, he repeated, more urgency this time. Shakily, she reached out, fingers closing around the rough hemp. Now ease back. Don't fight it. His instructions were calm, practical. She leaned back, trying to spread her weight, following his quiet commands. He began to pull, slowly, steadily, bracing himself against the sand. The rope cut into her hands, but she held on. The sucking grip of the quicksand resisted, but his pull was constant, unwavering. Inches at a time, she began to rise. Bao clung to her, crying softly. "Bring the boy," the cowboy instructed. Meilin maneuvered Bao, pushing him gently towards the rope. He grabbed it with his free hand. It was an agonizing process. The earth released its hold reluctantly. Meilin felt herself being dragged across the surface, gritty sand scouring her skin, Bao bumping along beside her. Finally, they were pulled onto firmer ground, collapsing gasping onto the blessedly solid, if still hot, earth. The cowboy approached cautiously, recoiling his rope. He knelt a short distance away, watching them. His eyes were kind, tired. He didn't speak, giving them space to recover. He offered them a canteen. Meilin took it with trembling hands, the water the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. She gave some to Bao, who drank greedily. Silence settled between them again, broken only by their ragged breathing and the relentless buzz of the flies. She looked at him, this stranger who had saved them from a silent, terrifying death. Gratitude warred with the deep-seated fear and mistrust that had become her constant companions. Who was he? Why had he helped them? He simply sat there, watching the horizon, his presence a quiet, unexpected anchor in the chaos of their world. He didn't introduce himself, and Meilin offered no details of their flight. The necessity of survival superseded words. He shared what little food he had, dry jerky, hardtack. It was meager but life-sustaining. He was Silas, he said eventually, when dusk settled and the stars began to prick the bruised purple sky. Just Silas. He didn't ask their names, didn't ask where they were going or what they were running from. He simply accepted their presence, their need. They followed him. Where else could they go? He knew the land, knew where to find the scarce water holes, where shelter might be found from the brutal sun and the cold desert nights. Meilin watched him constantly. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his gaze sweeping the landscape, alert to unseen dangers. He rarely spoke, but his actions were clear. He guided them, protected them in his silent way. He helped Bao over rough terrain, lifting him when necessary, his movements gentle despite his rugged appearance. Bao, initially terrified, began to watch Silas with a hesitant curiosity, then a tentative trust. Meilin's own fear slowly began to ebb, replaced by a cautious reliance. She had survived on her own for so long, every instinct screaming caution, suspicion. But Silas was different. He asked for nothing, expected nothing. He simply shared his meager resources and his knowledge of this unforgiving place. One evening, camped under a shallow overhang, a sudden dust storm whipped up, tearing at their makeshift shelter. Silas moved quickly, pulling them further back into the rock face, shielding them with his own body from the stinging sand. He didn't say it was protection. He simply did it, his broad back a solid barrier against the storm's fury. Meilin huddled with Bao, feeling the unexpected warmth of his presence, the simple security of not being utterly alone against the elements. She still didn't know his story, or why he was out here by himself. But she saw the calluses on his hands, the lines of weariness around his eyes, the quiet watchfulness that seemed a permanent part of him. He was a man shaped by the harshness of this world, yet he had shown them unexpected kindness. Their journey continued, a slow, arduous trek across the vast, indifferent land. They passed abandoned homesteads, bleached bones scattered in the dust, reminders of those who had tried and failed here. Silas seemed untouched by it all, simply navigating the terrain, his focus on their progress. Meilin, however, saw the ghosts, felt the weight of past failures. But with Silas, the fear was less pervasive. His quiet strength was a balm. Bao even managed a few small smiles, pointing out lizards or strange rock formations. For a few days, the brutal reality of their flight seemed to soften, replaced by the simple, demanding rhythm of survival guided by a steady hand. But the peace was fragile, a temporary reprieve. Meilin knew, with a chilling certainty, that they couldn't outrun their past forever. The world held other dangers besides quicksand and thirst. She watched Silas, wondering if he knew the true extent of the risks they carried with them, if he understood what saving them might ultimately cost him. The unspoken threat hung in the air, as palpable as the heat. They reached the edge of a wide, shallow canyon, the path forward uncertain. Silas scouted ahead, disappearing around a bend in the rock face. Maylin sat with Bao, resting in the sparse shade of a scrubby bush, her muscles aching, her mind weary. Suddenly, the crack of a rifle echoed through the canyon, sharp and sudden. Maylin froze, her blood turning to ice. The sound they had been running from, the sound that haunted her nightmares. It was closer than she had expected, closer than she had feared. She scrambled up, pulling Bao with her, adrenaline surging through her veins. More shots followed, rapid, purposeful. They came from the direction Silas had gone. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't know who was shooting, but she knew instinctively it was connected to her, to Bao, to what they had fled. There was shouting now, rough voices echoing off the canyon walls. She crouched low, shielding Bao with her body, peering towards the sound. She saw figures moving in the distance, men on horseback closing in. Her pursuers. They had found them. Panic clawed at her throat. But something else surfaced too. The quiet determination Silas had embodied. She had to keep Bao safe. She saw Silas emerge from behind a cluster of rocks, not running, but drawing his pistol, moving to intercept the riders. He was alone, facing multiple armed men. He wasn't fighting for himself, he was buying them time. A desperate, impossible act of sacrifice. Maylin didn't hesitate. "Bao, we go," she whispered urgently, pulling him towards a narrow, overgrown crevice in the canyon wall, the opposite direction from the gunfire. He whimpered, looking back towards Silas, towards the sounds of the fight. "Mama, the man, he is helping us. Now go." She pushed him gently, urging him into the crevice. It was tight, difficult to navigate with Bao's leg, but it offered concealment. The sound of the gunfight intensified behind them, then began to recede as they scrambled deeper into the rocks, following the hidden passage. Maylin didn't look back. She couldn't. Her focus was solely on moving forward, on putting distance between themselves and the danger, on honoring Silas's sacrifice by surviving. The sounds of pursuit faded entirely after a while, replaced by the echoes of their own ragged breathing and the scrape of rock under their worn boots. They emerged eventually onto a different slope, overlooking a different valley. The world felt silent, empty, profoundly changed. They were alone again, utterly alone. They walked for 3 more days, guided by the sun and a desperate will to live. 3 days of thirst, hunger, and the gnawing certainty of what had happened in the canyon. Maylin carried the weight of Silas's absence like a physical burden. He had saved them twice. The quicksand, then the men who had hunted them across the empty lands. His quiet strength, his unexpected kindness, had bought them their freedom, paid for with his life. On the 3rd day, stumbling towards a small, dusty town visible in the distance, they saw figures ahead. Men on horseback, townspeople or lawmen perhaps. Maylin tensed, ready to flee again, but they seemed different, less menacing. As they drew closer, she saw what they were gathered around. A solitary figure, lying still in the dust. Silas. His body lay where he had fallen, 3 days under the sun, a silent testament to his final act. The townspeople looked grim, some curious, some indifferent. Maylin felt no urge to weep, only a deep, cold ache. He was gone, but they were alive. Bao, leaning against her leg, understood. The quiet man who had helped them was dead. Maylin straightened her shoulders. She was still weary, still afraid, but something had shifted inside her. The raw vulnerability was tempered by a new, hard core of resilience. Silas had given them a chance. Now it was up to her. The world was still dangerous, still harsh. But she was not the same woman who had sunk despairingly into the quicksand. She had been rescued, sheltered, protected by a stranger who asked for nothing in return. That silent act of humanity, blooming in the unforgiving desert, had not just saved her life and Bao's. It had planted a seed of strength within her. She looked at the quiet body of the man who had sacrificed himself for them, a lone figure in a vast, indifferent land. He was a stranger, a cowboy, his path briefly crossing theirs with devastating consequence. But his final act had forged a bridge from despair to defiance. She took Bao's hand, her grip firm. They had to keep going. For Silas. For themselves. The journey wasn't over, but she would walk it now not just as a fugitive, but as a survivor, carrying the quiet dignity of a life unexpectedly given. The dust still blew, the sun still beat down, but the future, though uncertain, was theirs to face.